So today let's talk about what it takes to nurture your students, to take those prospects from slightly being interested to, oh my goodness, this is the perfect person for me. I believe that your course, your program is the perfect solution. And what does it take to make that happen? Let's talk about some of those traits today. I can't wait. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Course Creators HQ podcast, helping you navigate the latest techniques for creating and marketing online courses. And now, here's your host, Julie Hood.
Hey, welcome. It's episode 195. So you can jump out to the website coursecreatorshq.com/195 to be able to see the show notes and the links for some of the things we're talking about today. Plus, I have a couple things that I want to talk to you about. First off, if you have not signed up yet, we're doing the Course Profits Challenge in a couple weeks in June of 2024. So if you're listening to this later, go ahead and click the link. I'll try to make sure that it updates because I'll probably do this challenge again and you can see when the next one is. So that's going to be so much fun. 3-day challenge. I'm going to email you some assignments, short, quick, 15-minute assignments each day, and then we're going to get together at night to talk about it. So come join us. It's free, and I love these things because I get to actually connect and talk with you. So I hope you'll come join us. The link is coursecreatorshq.com/podcast challenge, or just check the show notes and you can jump in. And then I also need to tell you, I'm going to try to get back to updating this podcast on Tuesdays. I really liked how that worked, and I got out of the habit when my mom got sick and she was in the hospital, and we were just happy to get an episode out. And then it's slid to the end of the week, and I don't think that works the best for you. I think those Tuesday episodes are the best. So I'm going to try and shift up my routine so that we can go back to Tuesday episodes, and just wanted to let you know that. And then also for my Apple Podcast folks, if you're not listening on Apple Podcasts, you can fast forward through this part. But if you are, there's a feature that I wanted to tell you about, and it doesn't just apply to this podcast. It applies to all of the podcasts that you listen to. So sometime within the last year or so, Apple has changed the way they download episodes for you. And basically what happens is if you don't listen to the podcast, or if you don't listen within a certain amount of time, I'm not exactly sure when this feature kicks in, but what happens is if you happen to be away, let's say on vacation or something, and you go for a while and you miss episodes, in the past what would happen is when you return to the podcast and you listened, let's say, to an episode and you missed 4 or 5, Apple Podcasts would go ahead and download those previous episodes for you so that you could listen to the ones that you missed. Well, they've changed that now, and they don't automatically download previous episodes. So it's possible, if you're on Apple Podcasts, that you may have missed some of the episodes. So worth going into the show, the complete show, and going back to see if you've missed any. I'll also put a link in that will list all the episodes so that you can go and check that out just in case you missed anything along the way. Okay, so today, talking about these traits to help nurture your community, your subscribers, the people who are following you on social media. This is where you're finding your students. So are we doing a good job of connecting with them and really making them feel comfortable that you're the perfect person to help them? So this is part of that build, nurture, convert framework that I talked about in a previous episode. So I'll link to that too in case you want to go back. This is our 3rd episode. We had a build episode, and then this is the nurture episode. So if you want to go back and listen to those 2 episodes, you can. But here's the nurture part of this, in that I want you to show up for your connections, for the people who are following you, and help them understand how you teach, understand what you believe in, understand your experience, understand how you help people, and make them feel that you know them and that you know what's going on for them. So that's where a couple of these things came from. So let me just jump in. The first trait that I want to talk about is vulnerability. And I think this is one that, when used correctly, can be super, super helpful for connecting with your audience. And let me tell you a story to kind of talk about this one. So when I was a brand new mom and I was trying to get organized because my oldest, my son, he did not sleep. And so I had to be super efficient and working on minimal sleep in order to keep everything organized in our house. And at the time, this was very early on the internet, there were a couple sites where the women who were on there were very vulnerable, and they were posting about their experiences with trying to be organized. And one was organizedhome.com and the other was Fly Lady. And I don't think they're as popular or around as much as they were back then, but they were very much at the top of the list at the time for helping people get organized. And they would share their emails of stories of what had happened to them and then how they had come out of it, how they had survived some challenge or some specific thing, and survived is a little strong, but how they had mastered or overcome some of these things. And what was so comforting about it is they took the time to explain where they were, and really made me feel like it was okay to feel disorganized and to be a mess and to just not feel like I had it all together. And then they would give me the solution that they had. So the secret to this vulnerability, it's not the fact that you just spill all of your secrets and all of your challenges and all of your headaches and you just spill that everywhere. The secret to making this work, and I heard this from Amy Porterfield, and I thought this was so smart. She mentioned that you share these things after you're on the other side of them, so that you can talk about how you survived them, how you got through them, how you mastered them, how you've got the challenge, and then you've also got your solution. And it may not be the solution for everybody, but it does show that you're on the other side. You're not just dumping your difficult situations on your listeners. You're actually telling them about your path, about your journey through the experience. So play with that one a little bit. There may be some ways that you can use vulnerability in the stories that you're telling and the things that you're sharing, and pick those techniques where you're on the other side of it. Okay, that's the first trait, vulnerability. The second trait, I think, is a super important one, and that's consistency. That's where you're showing up regularly. You're showing people who are listening to you that they are important because you regularly communicate with them. They are at the top of your mind. You're making time to make sure things happen, like your email list. Maybe it's a podcast, that kind of thing. So that consistency of, and there's a little wiggle room in here. For me, it was trying to make sure I got an episode of this podcast out every week. Even better was when it was always on Tuesdays. But if you have to slide to weekly to just make it happen, if you can't commit to a certain day, I think that consistency is good too. So consistency of doing what you're going to say and convincing folks that you are going to be there for them regularly, that kind of thing, is super, super helpful. Okay, that's number 2, consistency. Number 3 is your wisdom. And what I mean by this is your experiences, your learnings, your knowledge has created this incredible level of wisdom that you can be sharing with your audience. When you're sending out emails, when you're posting on social media, you're sharing your knowledge and the wise things that you have learned. And that builds a connection and a credibility and an authority with your audience when you've got wise things to say. So try to incorporate those periodically. And it's a little bit tricky because you don't want to come off as super arrogant. So you have to kind of slide in the wise thoughts and slide them in to where somebody's going, oh, wow, he really knows what's going on in my head, or, oh, wow, that's super helpful. I hadn't thought of it that way. So wisdom is number 3. And then number 4, and I actually combined 2 of them here because I think they need to fit together, and that is compassion and empathy. And what I mean by that is you not only have compassion for the challenges and the struggles that your audience is going through, you have the empathy to be able to put yourself in their shoes, think about what they're experiencing, understand what they're thinking, what their thoughts are, understand how that's impacting them. Are they worried about making this month's bills? And so they're lying awake at night and going over and over in their head of, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay the bills this month? Is that your audience? Or, what is the more that you can be compassionate for where they are, wanting to help them, and then be empathetic enough to be able to describe it and speak to it and talk to it, that builds a connection like no other content when you can pull that out of what you're doing. And then the fun challenge of this and this next step for you is to find 50 different ways to say that same concept. That's what we have to do as good marketers, is we're taking these ideas and we're repeating them over and over again in multiple different ways so that folks, something I say today, if I say it in next week's episode slightly differently or from a different angle, it may resonate with you better, even though it's the same concept. So compassion and empathy so that you can think about what your audience is thinking and feeling, and then using that to find multiple ways to share it and connect with them. That's number 4. Number 5 is, and I almost changed this one, but I thought this was kind of funny. I want you to have an obsession in a good way, an obsession with your students and what they are experiencing and what they're going through and where they're at and how you can help them. And I find myself a lot of times waking up very early in the morning and I'm thinking about a specific client and something that they should be doing on LinkedIn, or I'm thinking about another client and I had an idea for a revenue option for them, or I'm thinking about you coming into the challenge and figuring out what is it could be most helpful. I've got 3 days with you. What's going to make the most difference and move you forward? So that obsession with helping your students comes through in what you're doing. It shows up. And it makes you a better instructor. It makes you a better teacher, a better coach, because you're constantly looking for new ways to help and new ways to connect. So obsession in a good way. And then number 6 is that you have to be able to communicate, and having the way to communicate with your audience. So not only from your skill level, like, are you a writer? Are you a speaker? Are you a video person? And are you constantly improving that? But also, what are your channels for communication? So is it email? Is it social media? Is it podcasts? Is it YouTube? What are your channels that you're communicating all of these thoughts and these traits and stories with? How are you communicating that? And are there ways you could do it even better, where you're rethinking some of the thoughts and sharing them in new ways? And so hopefully that gives you a few things to think about. I'll recap this list in case you're taking notes. Number 1 is vulnerability. Number 2 is consistency. Number 3 is wisdom. Number 4 is compassion and empathy. Number 5 is obsession in a good way. And number 6 is being that communicator, so that you're communicating these messages out to the prospects and to the connections that need to hear them from you. So I hope this episode gave you some food for thought of things that I could be doing better, things that I could change, improve, test, try out, see what messages are landing, see what kinds of techniques and stories and ideas are resonating with your audience. So that's another great reason to have some of these things set up, is you can test out your messages and see what jumps out and see what people really jump on. And it's one of the things I used to do a lot of on Clubhouse, and so I'm sad that Clubhouse isn't useful anymore. Haven't found a replacement for it, but I'm on the hunt because it was such a nice way to be able to connect with your audience and bounce some things off of them, share some content, and then kind of see how it landed, see what kind of questions you got. So look for those places. You know, you may still be able to do some of that if you have a Facebook group, or if you have some other kind of group that you've pulled together. Figure out how you can communicate and share some of these things with them and see what's working specifically. Because a lot of times we just have to test some of these things, test out some of these messages, and every now and then something will hit and you'll be excited to share it and connect with your audience. So I hope this was a fun episode. I hope it gave you some ideas. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for being here and giving me the space in your earbuds every week, hopefully on Tuesdays now. And I look forward to catching you next week on the next episode. Take care. Have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you soon.